I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, never been. However, when Force Awakens dropped in 2015, I couldn't help but love the movie. I felt it really captured the magic of the original trilogy in a way I thought was not possible anymore. It wouldn't take long for things to go south, and after two abysmal sequels that are terrible in their own special way, my views on Force Awakens have soured. I've watched the movie again and can't really understand what I saw in it the first time around. Where is that magic? Where's that spark? It's just a blatant New Hope rehash. I'm telling you all of this because, as you know, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the first sequel to 7 Remake, is dropping in a couple of weeks. And my views on Final Fantasy VII Remake are pretty similar to my views on Force Awakens before I endured those awful sequels. I really love it. I'm still surprised to this day at how Square was able to catch lightning in a bottle and make even someone like myself, without a lot of nostalgia for the original, get really invested in its characters and story. However, I'm making this video not to shower 7 Remake with praise. If you haven't played it, what are you doing? Go play it right now, it's great. I'm making it because the more I think about the new elements in 7 Remake and what awaits us down the road, the more I'm overcome by this feeling of dread, because I don't know if Square will pull it off, and even if they can pull it off anymore, considering the seeds that were planted in Remake. As you might have imagined, this is a very spoiler-heavy discussion, so if you haven't played it yet and would like to go in blind, why not watch my Final Fantasy ranking from last year? That was fun. And, as always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't, it would really help me out. Anyway, let's go! Before I get to the meat and potatoes of this video, I just have to restate how much I liked this game. When I played it for the first time, I was genuinely surprised at how well it translated the characters from the original. Absolutely everyone looks and sounds how you would have expected them to, how your imagination pictured them back in the 90s, and that's no small feat. It's a perfect balance of anime and realism, and the small tweaks in design are all sensible. You sense they were put there not just for the sake of it, but to make the designs more balanced and believable due to the level of detail in these new character models. Stuff like Tifa's sports bra, Barrett's beard, the more somber tone in Cloud's clothing compared to the original. There's a lot of care in all of it. Furthermore, the voice acting is superb. The English voice actors elevate the material and bring out a lot of nuance to the characters. You can really sense how torn Tifa feels about the whole eco-terrorist shit.
But not like this. I feel trapped.
You can sense the sass in Aerith's voice.
Cloud, requesting permission to kill.
Denied.
The anger and eagerness in Barrett's.
You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? I know you can!
And Cloud, man, Cloud could have been this really gloomy and moody, boring walking cardboard cutout, but he isn't.
No charm, no wit, big sword, but no skills.
I've got skills.
Be nice.
I'm doing my best.
He's sarcastic and a little insecure while trying to front as this badass soldier that he really isn't. Great acting plus great facial animations and character models means that you can really connect with these characters. They feel alive. So, kudos to Nomura and the rest of the team. Final Fantasy VII Remake actually made me like the original even more than I already did. So much so that now I have the Platinum for it. I also have the Platinum for 7 Remake. I have played it 3 times since 2020. I have poured almost 100 hours of my life into this game because to me, it was that good. If you have been living under a rock and don't remember what Final Fantasy VII is about, or maybe suffer from short-term memory loss like Dory, Know that you play as Cloud, a former elite soldier of Shinra, an electric power company that achieves the impressive feat of sucking harder than real-world electric power companies. Even as a former Shinra employee, Cloud accepts a request from Tifa, his childhood friend, to help an eco-terrorist group blow up some of Shinra's reactors in Midgar, the city where the games take place. After all, who wouldn't accept a request from Tifa? So, Cloud helps Avalanche members Barret, Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge blow up one of the reactors in the game's iconic opening. He'll also meet Florist Aerith, who sort of is in hiding, as she's a person of interest for Hojo, a Shinra scientist and Major sleazebag. As the game progresses, more reactors blow up and Shinra will do the unspeakable to stop Avalanche, in one of the most memorable scenes in all of Final Fantasy. And pretty much that's it, that's the setup. At least for the remake, that is. All of this was part of a 7-hour-long section of the original game, but here it has been expanded into 30 plus hours. I know some think the story has been stretched too thin because of this, but hey, that gives you more opportunities to engage with the game's kick-ass combat. I haven't played Final Fantasy XVI yet, but I highly doubt that the Devil May Cry-inspired combat in that one, as good as it may be, can hold a candle to the combat in VII Remake. To me, this right here should be the future of the series if Final Fantasy doesn't have an interest in returning to its turn-based roots. And that's not only because the combat is incredibly fun, but also because you can trace the lineage of this battle system to many older Final Fantasy games instead of other franchises. It feels like a natural evolution of the series. Sure, it's real time and some purists won't take to that on principle, but really, the way real time works here is very similar to what we had in previous Final Fantasy titles. You know, the way you can change characters with a tap of a button, and each character has their own limit breaks and playstyles, is all reminiscent of Type 0. The staggering mechanic that allows you to deal higher damage to enemies is straight out of Final Fantasy XIII, and the ATB bar slowly filling up so you can use spells or special attacks is lifted straight from the SNES and PS1 Final Fantasy games. I just wish they had gone a step further and also borrowed the Gambit system from 12, because the AI-controlled party members can be really useless sometimes. But I feel like I'm alone in that one. I guess most people don't care about micromanaging their party members, but this could have been a feature at least in hard mode, couldn't it? Oh well. Even without Gambits, I immediately connected to this battle system, and I honestly feel like it is sort of a treat for fans. You know, seeing so many elements from past games brought together in a single battle system like this. Combat in VII Remake is fast-paced, fun, and is just about as challenging as it should be on normal. I seriously hope Rebirth builds on this foundation because Nomura and the team have come up with something truly special here. I really don't have much else to say without diving into spoilers. If you haven't played the game and would like to remain spoiler-free, this is your last warning. I'd recommend you tune out now, because from here on out, I'll be dropping spoilers left and right. Just make sure to like the video and subscribe, okay? To the rest, let's continue. As I stated before, some feel like the original Midgar section couldn't hold a full game on its own, but I honestly don't think so. Even though there are issues, I still believe most of the changes and additions are positive and improve the overall experience. I also feel like the game wrapping up right after the characters leave Midgar makes sense. It feels like an appropriate moment to conclude the story in the first part of a trilogy, even though this isn't exactly a third of the way through the original narrative. Still, despite thoroughly enjoying it, I agree that Chapter 4 feels stacked on and doesn't really connect to the rest. We really needed more callbacks to the characters introduced in that chapter later on. Maybe have Jesse's mom showing up in a scene to react to the plate drop, or bring that new soldier with the nonsense sends Nomura Hare back to the second motorcycle chase later on in the game. Chapter 11 also wrecks the pace of the narrative with a detour that's far too long for the moment of the story we were experiencing. If they wanted to expand anything that part, they should have just given us Barret and the others preparing to take on Shinra instead of that Casper bullshit. I also agree that there is a lot of padding and backtracking, like the second sewer visit is especially guilty in that regard. Still, I didn't mind any of that all that much, because I feel like the extra time given to the Avalanche trio and to the residents of the slums make the tragedy of Chapter 12 really hit hard. In fact, much harder than in the original. Controlling Aerith in the slums as everything goes to shit was one of the most electrifying gaming moments I experienced last gen, even though I knew exactly what was about to happen, just because of how invested I was. And even if some of these extra sections don't add much, like the underground lab stuff in Chapter 13, they are still great excuses to play around with the battle system. I'm fine with all of these changes and additions, I really don't mind them. There are only two changes that I feel like bring the game down, and they are sort of related. Number 1, I really feel like Sephiroth should not be as big of a presence as he is in this game, but I understand from a commercial standpoint why he's here, right? People are impatient, and even though many fans didn't want any changes, they still wanted to see Sephiroth in the game. Number 2, the whispers and the multiple timeline nonsense. The biggest point of contention is obviously the second one, so let's dig a little deeper. So if you don't recall, the whispers are the floating, ghostly things that look as if Harry Potter Dementors were a Kingdom Hearts Heartless. They're rolling the story similar to that of the TVA in Loki, trying to stop anything from deviating from the established sacred timeline.
Whispers. Perhaps best described as arbiters of fate. They are drawn to those who attempt to alter destiny's course and ensure they do not.
Like capital D? Destiny?
The flow of the great river that is the planet, from inception to oblivion.
I know people who felt personally attacked by this move, as if the whispers represented fans trying to stop the creative team from making any changes over the original game, and I get both sides here. I get that Nomura and the others maybe really felt trapped, as if they couldn't change anything without backlash, and decided to bake that frustration into the story. And I also get fans getting pissy that the devs portray them as a buzzkill police if you go for a meta reading of the game, especially if you pay full price for this thing. No one wants to spend $60 to get mocked. I get both sentiments. However, I do have to side with the fans here, not the complaining, overzealous type, as many got enraged by any sort of change, as if anything that was changed from the original was done by Nomura to spite them personally. I'm really talking about the fans who felt offended by the whispers in particular, because their existence meant that the devs did not trust a large chunk of the game's fan base to act maturely and accept the unexpected. Because really, if you want to change stuff up, just fucking do it. You're just gonna get some people complaining online, that's it, who cares? If you wanted to have fucking Tifa stab Aerith in the gut because she's been secretly working for Shinra, then do it and face the backlash, but tell the story you want to tell. And really, the game goes out of its way just to show how they are stopping minor changes from happening so that the story can follow the original. So, oh my, Jesse's hurt, so that's why Cloud will have to join Barret and Tifa in the Mako Reactor 5 mission. You could have easily achieved the same outcome without the whisper nonsense. You could even have that dude from Chapter 4 with the Nomura nonsense hair come back in Chapter 5 looking for Jessie to arrest her or kill her because he wants Cloud for himself or whatever, so she has to go into hiding, leaving Barret with no choice but to take Cloud. Also, if you wanted to remove the stakes of the original by having Jesse, Biggs, Wedge, and Zack all survive, you could, just do that. It's your story. You are not appeasing the fans by showing you are annoyed by them. So that's my first issue with the Whispers. It feels like an unnecessary jab at fans. If you want to change shit up, change shit up. Don't be coy about it. My second and bigger issue with the Whisper idea is that it opens the multiverse can of worms, which I don't think Square, with its track record, has the ability to tackle well. I think many elements that are necessary for such a story to work won't be explained whatsoever. How did Sephiroth gain awareness of the different timelines? How does he see the future to know he'll be defeated? Why would a goody two-shoes like Aerith try to defy fate and leave things open to change if she knows Cloud and the others will be successful in the end? It reeks of selfishness. It feels like she's risking it all because she doesn't want to die. Also, if the game killed fate and now they are free to change history however they want, why does it seem like we are getting the same plot beats from the original in Rebirth? Do you really believe these things are gonna get satisfactory answers? Yeah, me neither. And these are just some of my issues with the multiverse idea as is. There's another issue. Many can't stand multiverse stories anymore. I know I'm definitely done with them. Everything Everywhere All at Once is the multiverse story to beat, and everything else like Multiverse of Madness or The Flash felt incredibly safe and boring by comparison. Sure, the idea of Remake and the OG game coexisting within a multiverse is bold and forward-thinking, or at least it was when it was conceived back in 2016. By 2020, when Remake was released, it was still pretty ingenious, because Multiverse Mania hadn't kicked into high gear yet. Now, after a deluge of samey, meandering superhero fluff that has in multiverses their only selling point, the idea has become passé. The mere thought of alternate realities and multiverses feels exhausting and really removes the stakes or tension. Like, sure, Aerith dies, but only in this timeline. She may be alive in this other one. You just have to find a way to replace the dead one with another one from another reality, Rick and Morty style. Do you see how this idea of multiverses really removes any tension? Even if Nomura were to pull out a reversal out of his ass and now Tifa gets a sword to the gut instead of Aerith, the tension is gone because multiverse! And the interesting thing, to me at least, is that no one was really aware that this is how we would collectively end up feeling about multiverses until it happened. I don't think the devs anticipated this numbing effect and the lack of consequences when they came up with this idea for Remake. I mean, how could they, a decade in advance? Marvel at least clearly didn't. DC? Even less. So, the fact that this is the direction Remake clearly was pointing towards means that the writers over at Square have written themselves into a corner. If they drop the multiverse whisper nonsense because people won't take to it anymore and it won't excite anyone when everything is said and done in like 2028, then they're going to end up with a disjointed trilogy just like the last Star Wars one. If they double down on the multiverse angle, then they're going to end up with a very dated finished product that will scream early 2020s and won't have the lasting impact the original has had. Still, I personally choose the latter. It's better to have a dated but cohesive trilogy than a disjointed garbage fire. I guess a lot of this can be chalked up to these long-ass dev cycles that have become the norm in the past decade or so. These really hinder ongoing narratives across multiple titles. A little over a decade ago, all 3 titles in the Mass Effect trilogy were dropped in a span of 5 years, all developed by many of the same creative heads, in the same engine and for the same platforms. Same goes for the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy, all titles released in a span of 4 years. Although in that case the drop in production values is glaring, but still my point holds. That sort of long narrative is impossible today because development cycles are just too damn long now, and planning a commercial entertainment product 10, 15 years ahead of release like this isn't feasible. There are too many factors involved, it's just too risky. Look at Marvel now. Kevin Feige obviously knows the MCU has gone off the rails, but there's too much stuff already in the pipeline. There's nothing that can be done because his bets from 7 years ago haven't panned out as he had hoped. And that's what Square was probably aiming at, betting on the safety of Final Fantasy VII as an IP. And even if you have a surefire hit IP in your hands, such a long process still comes at the expense of the creators behind it. No wonder the latest Norse God of War games ended up being a duology, even though they sold like gangbusters. Cory Barlog would have been shackled to this one creative idea for like 15 years of his career to turn that narrative into a 3-parter like the Greek one, and I guess no one wants to spend almost half of their career nurturing an IP that they don't own. Just look at what happened at BioWare last year. To sum this rant up, I feel like the whispers and the multiverse idea will ultimately hurt the remake trilogy and its legacy. And what makes it frustrating is the fact that I personally don't feel like any of this was needed. They already had a pretty great, timeless story that, in fact, is more relevant today than it was in 1997. They didn't need to come up with some crazy nonsense to make the project worthwhile. Just fleshing out the elements that were already there would have sufficed. And if making 7 Remake felt unfulfilling for Kitase Nomura and the others without fundamentally changing the core idea of Final Fantasy VII from saving the planet from corporate greed and exploitation to let's defy fate with the power of friendship, then they really should have reconsidered if making a remake was something they wanted to make at all. Or maybe they just couldn't criticize corporate greed because, hey, that's the only reason why the remake exists at all. Maybe Square would have greenlit a remake with or without the original Final Fantasy VII team, and they felt like they had no choice but to accept it to stop others from bastardizing their baby. If we follow this line of reasoning, maybe the Whispers aren't crazy fans, but maybe, just maybe, they represent Square's management hovering outside Nomura's office to make sure the game would please fans and sell 10 million copies or whatever. Man, I feel bad for Nomura now. The idea is still crap though. It's not crap enough to ruin 7 Remake itself, not yet at least. But if Nomura and his team fail at delivering a convincing multiverse story, which is very likely considering the recent history of this narrative device, the bitter taste of failure will retroactively affect my love for the first title in this trilogy. It happened to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, could very well happen to Final Fantasy VII Remake as well, and that would be a pity, because right now, I really enjoy this game. That's why my verdict on 7 Remake is still pending. I have to wait and see. That's it, everyone. Are you also worried about the multiverse angle in the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy? Or do you think this is just a tempest in a teapot on my part? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you around YouTube.